Heart disease of varying severity may be complicating 1% of all pregnancies. Physiological changes in pregnancy may have tremendous effect on the cardiovascular system, and a healthy heart can compensate for the increased demand of pregnancy, while a decompensated heart will fail to do so and develop symptoms. Unless the heart disease is diagnosed timely and properly managed, it may result in morbidity and mortality of the pregnant woman. The physiological changes in pregnancy may have anatomical, physiological, and functional effect on the cardiovascular system. Anatomically, the growing uterus will push the diaphragm up, thereby pushing the heart up and rotating it posterolaterally. There is an increase in the cardiac output, which is a product of pulse rate and stroke volume. So the pulse rate will be increasing about 10% or 15 beats per minute, and there is a 10% increase in the stroke volume. The cardiac output may increase about 40% in the antenatal period, and there is a further increase of 15% in the first stage and about another 50% in the second stage. In the immediate postpartum, this increase may be up to 60 to 80%, and this may gradually revert to normal and become or revert to the non-pregnant stage within 2 weeks of delivery. The increase in the cardiac output will start as early as 5 weeks of pregnancy and will reach a maximum by about 25 to 30 weeks of pregnancy, and it may continue in that stage till labor pain starts. Pregnancy hormones like progesterone, nitrous oxide, and other vasodilators will cause a systemic fall in the systemic vascular resistance and will result in a fall in the blood pressure. There is also a fall in the pulmonary vascular resistance. Due to the weight of the gravid uterus pressing on the great vessels of the lower limb, there will be increase in the venous pressure of the lower extremities, resulting in physiological edema. In a supine position, the gravid uterus will be pressing on the inferior vena cava and the aorta, causing decreased venous return and result in what we call as the supine hypotension syndrome, which is also called aortocaval syndrome. These physiological changes may produce signs and symptoms which may mimic a heart disease. For example, the woman may complain of breathlessness, palpitation, or excessive fatigue. There can be prominent neck veins. There can be fetal edema. The apex beat may be displaced upwards and lateral to the midclavicular line. There may be displacement of the heart to the left. And due to the increase in the blood volume and the rapid filling of the heart, there can be a physiological third heart sound. There can be functional murmurs. Even systolic murmurs may be there, and there will be, due to the increased vascularity to the mammary area, there can be a internal mammary venous hum. Due to the left axis deviation of the heart, there can be ECG changes also, which show ST depression, non-specific ST and T wave changes. Chest X-ray may show apparent cardiomegaly, and there will be straightening of left heart border. A careful and detailed history will help to pick up women who have organic heart disease. When a woman complaining of breathlessness, ask about whether it is progressive in nature or whether there is any limitation of activity. Physiological breathlessness will not have any limitation, and the woman will say she will be able to complete her work without any limitation, whereas a woman with a heart disease will be forced to limit her activity due to breathlessness and dyspnea occurring in the night or rest at rest will be pathological. Chest pain should be taken as a symptom of heart disease. There can be symptoms like hemoptysis, syncope, which may suggest a heart disease. Clubbing, thrill, parasternal heave, presence of diastolic murmur, systolic murmur of intensity greater than or equal to 3. Any presence of persistent arrhythmias and atrial fibrillation, loud pulmonary second sound, or a persistent split in the second heart sound. All these suggest the possibility of an organic heart disease. Almost all types of heart disease can occur in a pregnant woman. Although rheumatic heart disease and congenital heart disease is the commonest. Ischemic heart disease, even though rare, nowadays due to the postponement of pregnancy to old age and the greater occurrence of obesity and metabolic syndrome. Ischemic heart disease can also encounter in pregnant women. Arrhythmias and myopathies, even though rare, can occur in pregnant ladies. New York Heart Association classification will help to assess the functional capacity of a pregnant woman having the heart disease. Class 1, there is no limitation of physical activity. Class 2, there is slight limitation of physical activity, but she is comfortable with the ordinary activities. Class 3, there is marked limitation of physical activity like going to the bathroom, having a bath, etc. will cause dyspnea, but she will be comfortable at rest. Class 4, patients will be having dyspnea even at rest and they are severely compromised. Depending upon the risk of causing maternal mortality, cardiac disease in pregnancy can be categorized into low risk, moderate risk and high risk. In low risk category, the maternal mortality is less than 1%. It is include heart disease with a septal defect and mitral stenosis of NYHA classification 1 and 2, pulmonary patent ductus arteriosus, pulmonary and tricuspid lesions. Lesions which are included in the moderate risk category are mitral stenosis having a NYHA classification of 3 and 4, Marfan syndrome with normal aorta, coarctation of aorta which is uncomplicated, uncorrected, tetralogy of Fallot and prosthetic valves. In this group, the maternal mortality is about 5 to 15%. Women with Eisenmenger syndrome, pulmonary hypertension, Marfan syndrome with the abnormal aorta, dilated cardiomyopathy. These women belong to high risk category and the maternal mortality in this group is 25 to 50%. Having a heart disease, a pregnant woman and her fetus may be predisposed to severe complications. Maternal complications are acute pulmonary edema, cardiac failure, worsening of the NYHA class, there can be arrhythmias like atrial fibrillation, supraventricular tachycardia, ventricular arrhythmias. She is more prone for infective endocarditis and even result in maternal death. Fetal prognosis is usually good in women with a rheumatic heart disease or a congenital heart disease without cyanosis. When there is hypoxia, the fetus may suffer from prematurity and fetal growth restriction. In cyanotic heart disease like Eisenmenger syndrome, tetralogy of Fallot, the fetal loss may be as high as 50%. In women having a congenital heart disease, there is a chance the fetus may also inherit the disease, and the risk is twice that seen in a general population. But it may also depend upon the mode of inheritance. In conditions like Marfan syndrome, which is an autosomal dominant disease, the chance of inheritance is about 50%. Preconception counseling has an important role in the management of women having a heart disease. Every pregnancy in a woman should be a planned one, and the counseling should be done in collaboration with a cardiologist. A thorough evaluation of the cardiac status should be done, including an echo, to know the anatomical lesion, the functional capacity of the ventricles, and the pressure gradient in the heart. A NYHA classification should also be done. And if the heart disease is a high-risk category, which involves high mortality, like Eisenmenger syndrome, cardiomyopathy with a residual disease, Marfan syndrome with an abnormal aorta, or severe pulmonary hypertension. All these involve high maternal mortality, and pregnancy should be discouraged. There may be lesions which are surgically amenable to correction, like a PDA, VSD, ASD, or a mitral stenosis or aortic stenosis, having NYHA classification 3 or 4. Such women better to undergo surgery before attempting a pregnancy. Women with a congenital heart disease, the risk of inheritance to the offspring should also be explained, and we should also discuss about the possible effect on the mother and fetus when pregnancy is undertaken, and women on prosthetic valves and on anticoagulants should be explained about the effect of anticoagulant on the fetus and its effect on pregnancy and delivery. Antenatal care in this woman should be in a tertiary care center in collaboration with a cardiologist. In the first visit, a mandatory cardiac evaluation should be done, and the NYHA classification should be assessed, an echo should be done, and the anatomical lesion and the functional capacity of the heart assessed. And if the nature of the lesion is such that pregnancy is contraindicated, pregnancy can be terminated. Remember, in a woman with a heart disease, MTP is possible only up to 12 weeks, and no second trimester abortion is advocated in a woman with a heart disease. If it is a functional NYHA classification is 3 or 4, pregnancy should be either terminated or a surgery can be planned in the second trimester after 20 weeks. Women receiving any medication should be reviewed for any possible complication or effect on the fetus, and they should be educated regarding the various warning signs and complications that can occur during pregnancy, and to report to the hospital then and there. Women who are NYHA class 1 or 2 can be managed as outpatients, while class 3 and 4 should be admitted immediately and they should be in the hospital throughout their pregnancy. The frequency of antenatal checkup should be according to the individual patient. They should be seen at least once in 2 weeks, and each visit inquire about any increase in the limitation of physical activity and watch for any signs of cardiac failure or any new symptoms. Events that precipitate cardiac failure are any febrile illness, respiratory tract infection, anemia, arrhythmias, hypertension, hyperthyroidism, multiple pregnancy, and any type of stress. So all these precipitating events should be promptly diagnosed and managed vigorously so as to avoid a cardiac failure. The fetal complication can be avoided by doing a screen for any cardiac anomalies. Echo scans should be done every month, and if needed, fetal surveillance tests should be done like a NST or a biophysical profile to ensure the well-being of the fetus. Hospital delivery is mandatory for every woman having a heart disease. Those women who are on outpatient management should be admitted at least 2 weeks prior to their expected date. A few weeks of rest will also help to improve the functional capacity of the heart. Vaginal delivery is preferred in these women, but no prolonged labor or trial labor should be advocated. Indication for cesarean section. Heart disease per se is coarctation of aorta. This is due to the fear of rupturing a berry aneurysm, which may be usually associated with coarctation of aorta. During labor, the cardiac output further increases about 15% in the first stage and about 50% in the second stage. So they are more predisposed to cardiac failure and pulmonary edema. There is no contraindications for induction, but you have to judiciously select the agent for induction. There will be pain and anxiety during labor, so there should be provided proper analgesia. Epidural analgesia is the best option except for women having a left to right shunt, which is uncorrected because there is a fear of reverse shunt if there is a hypertension, and hence epidural analgesia is better avoided in such patients. If in the absence of epidural analgesia, morphine may be a better analgesia for this woman. Any invasive procedure for this woman may predispose them to infective endocarditis. So, women who are on prosthetic valves or valvular heart disease or cardiomyopathies should be receiving infective endocarditis prophylaxis. They should not be ambulant and should be confined to bed in a semi-recumbent position with a lateral tilt. This will reduce the increase in the heart rate. Fluid overload should be avoided, and the fluid should be limited to less than 75 ml per hour. There should be close monitoring of the mother for any features of cardiac failure or other complications, and she should be monitored for any tachycardia, tachypnea, any fall in the oxygen saturation and basal crepitation. Fetus should be having a continuous electronic fetal monitoring for detection of any hypoxia. Voluntary straining during the second stage will precipitate cardiac failure. To avoid that, the second stage should be cut short and forceps is the preferred instrument. In the third stage, the contraction and retraction of the uterus will auto-transfuse about 500 to 600 ml of blood into the circulation. This will precipitate cardiac failure immediate postpartum. To avoid this, at the end of second stage or immediately after the delivery of the placenta, IV furosemide is given, which will decrease the preload. Ergometrin and methergine is absolutely contraindicated because this will cause forceful uterine contraction and thereby increasing the blood getting into circulation. Plus, there will be generalized vasoconstriction, increase in the blood pressure. All this will precipitate cardiac failure. Hence, it should be avoided. Woman should be observed in the labor room after delivery for minimum 24 hours. In the postpartum period, there will be increase in the vascular resistance and mobilization of extravascular fluid into the circulation, thereby increasing the afterload. This will cause pulmonary congestion and precipitate cardiac failure also. Other complications that can occur during the postpartum period is infection, for which prophylactic antibiotics should be given, and thromboembolism. To avoid that, patients should be encouraged to have early ambulation, and thromboprophylaxis should be given for women who is at increased risk. In women with a cardiac problem, it is ideal to limit the family size to 1 or 2, and spacing should be adequate at least 3 years to avoid any cardiac complication. And progestin oral pills or injectables can be advised for this woman. Combined oral contraceptive has a risk of thromboembolism, hence contraindicated. LNG intrauterine system is another option for spacing in this woman. Bilateral contraceptive can be used, but since the failure rate is high and it is male-centered, it is not very useful. If the woman wants permanent sterilization, interval sterilization with Manilap is advised. Laparoscopic sterilization due to this transdermal position and creation of pneumoperitoneum will cause cardiac embarrassment and hence not advised. For those women who will not come for interval sterilization or who will be lost for follow-up, you can advise a postpartum sterilization after 1 week of delivery, because after 1 week, almost 80% of the cardiac changes will have reverted to normal. If the surgical risk for the female is too much, vasectomy for the male can be advised. Any invasive procedure in this woman should be done under antibiotic cover due to the risk of infective endocarditis. Women receiving prosthetic valves, previous history of endocarditis, complex cyanotic heart disease, cardiac transplant, hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, rheumatic valvular heart disease. All these women need infective endocarditis prophylaxis, whereas uncomplicated heart disease like ASD, VSD, PDA, the simple mitral prolapse, these women may not require infective endocarditis prophylaxis. For prophylaxis, we give ampicillin 2 gram plus gentamicin 1.5 gram per kilogram 30 to 60 minutes before the procedure. In cases the woman is penicillin sensitive, cefazolin or ceftriaxone may be given 1 gram. Or another option is teicoplanin 400 mg IV plus gentamicin. Simple procedures like vaginal examination, dental extraction, etc. requires 2 gram amoxicillin orally as a single dose. If procedure is prolonged for more than 6 hours, antibiotic dose should be repeated. Any woman with a surgically correctable heart disease should undergo the surgery before attempting pregnancy. There may be some women whose heart disease is diagnosed during pregnancy only, like a severe mitral stenosis or aortic stenosis. So in such women, surgery may be required during pregnancy, and if attempted, should be done in the second trimester after 20 weeks. Indications for doing cardiac surgery are recurrent pulmonary edema, cardiac failure not responding to medical treatment, and NYHA class 3 or 4 in early pregnancy. The most common procedure done in pregnancy are balloon valvuloplasty. There is a risk of radiation involved to the fetus. When the valve is calcified and not pliable, there may be it may require open heart surgery for valve replacement. In such cases, there may be use of cardiopulmonary bypass, which will result in high fetal loss and maternal morbidity. So far we discussed about the general aspects of cardiac disease in pregnancy. Now we will discuss the important aspects of individual heart disease which we commonly encounter in pregnancy. The most common heart disease we encounter in pregnant women are rheumatic valvular heart disease, then congenital heart disease. The most common valvular heart disease is mitral stenosis seen in pregnancy, and the severity depends upon the valvular area. Normal mitral valve area is about 4 to 6 cm square. If it is less than 1.5 cm square, it is a severe stenosis, and between 1.5 to 2.5 cm square valvular area, it is considered to be a moderately severe mitral stenosis. Women with a NYHA class 1 and 2 will tolerate pregnancy well, but class 3 and 4 have a worse prognosis. The complications that usually encounter are left atrial failure and pulmonary edema. This is due to the increase in preload cannot be transferred through the tight mitral valve, and there is limitation in increasing the cardiac output in this patient, and as a result there will be left atrial failure leading to pulmonary edema. There can be more chance of atrial fibrillation and formation of atrial thrombus, and there is a chance of thromboembolism. And these women require infective endocarditis prophylaxis because they are more predisposed to infective endocarditis. If it is a severe class 3 or 4, pregnancy can be surgery should be done before pregnancy, or if diagnosed during pregnancy, better to do a valvuloplasty after 20 weeks. Mitral valve regurgitation usually is rheumatic in etiology but may be associated with mitral valve prolapse or with congenital conditions like Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, or it may be due to papillary muscle dysfunction. Usually well tolerated in pregnancy because a decrease in the peripheral resistance will reduce the regurgitation in this woman. But if severe, there can be pulmonary congestion, atrial fibrillation, and congestive cardiac failure. Valve replacement prior to pregnancy is the best option. Mitral valve prolapse is usually asymptomatic and tolerate pregnancy well. If associated with mitral regurgitation, infective endocarditis prophylaxis is indicated. Aortic stenosis usually is congenital but may be rheumatic or age-related. The normal valve area of the aortic valve is about 3 to 4 cm square, and if it is less than 1 cm square, is considered to be a severe stenosis and is a high risk in pregnancy. It should be corrected before pregnancy, ideally, but valvuloplasty may be tried if required during pregnancy. Aortic regurgitation and pulmonary stenosis are rare in pregnancy. Aortic regurgitation usually will be well tolerated in pregnancy because the fall in the peripheral resistance will decrease the regurgitation. Pulmonary stenosis usually congenital, but if severe, best corrected prior to pregnancy. Women with a valve replacement pose a problem during pregnancy and need special attention. Artificial valves may be of two types. Bioprosthetic valves, there is no risk of thrombosis, but there is a high rate of valve failure. Mechanical valves, on the other hand, have a long life, but there is a risk of thromboembolism and infective endocarditis. And this patient may be on anticoagulant throughout their life. When the woman on anticoagulation gets pregnant, there is risk to the mother due to bleeding in the antepartum period as well as in the postpartum period, and the fetus. There may be congenital anomalies, warfarin embryopathy, and even neurological abnormality because warfarin will cross the placenta to affect the baby. So the problem should be discussed with the patient and family, and to avoid the congenital anomaly, warfarin should be replaced in the first trimester by heparin. Heparin has an advantage because it does not cross the placenta. Also, the half-life of heparin is 6 hours, and you can reverse the effect of heparin by protamine sulfate. So the heparin can be used after 36 weeks also, because it may be difficult to control the bleeding due to warfarin during delivery. In between 12 weeks and 36 weeks, warfarin can be used safely. Heparin should be stopped 6 hours before delivery or induction and can be restarted after 6 hours of a normal delivery or 12 hours in case of a cesarean section. And in the postpartum period, warfarin can be restarted, and both heparin and warfarin should be continued until the PT INR ratio is between 2 to 2.5. Once it is within this range, heparin can be withdrawn and patient continued on warfarin. And again, there is a risk of thrombo. Even if there is anticoagulant, this patient may be having a risk of both embolism and hemorrhage. So they should be closely monitored. Coming to congenital heart disease. There are two types of congenital heart disease, acyanotic and cyanotic. Acyanotic heart disease are VSD, ASD and PDA, where there is a shunt of blood from left to right. Majority of these lesions are corrected during childhood, and pregnancy in this woman are not a problem. Even if it is uncorrected, pregnancy is well tolerated. Problem comes when when the patient develops hypertension, as occurs when during anesthesia, like spinal anesthesia or epidural analgesia, or if there is a hemorrhage, like postpartum hemorrhage, and the shunt reversal occurs, there will be blood flow from right to left and become cyanosis, and patient develop hypoxia and other problems. Rare complications that can occur in this group of women are pulmonary artery hypertension, arrhythmias, cardiac failure, and development of a paradoxical embolism. Women with cyanotic heart disease like Epstein anomaly, tetralogy of Fallot, and transposition of great vessels, there is cyanosis, and usually this woman, if uncorrected, will not go to the adulthood. But nowadays surgical correction is possible, and woman may come with a pregnancy, and the prognosis depends upon the residual lesion, and the risk may be moderate to high risk depending upon the residual lesion. Peripartum cardiomyopathy is specific to pregnancy. This is characterized by left ventricular dilatation and systolic dysfunction leading to pulmonary edema. There is no history of any prior heart disease or any identifiable cause for cardiac failure. Cardiac failure develops in the last month of pregnancy or within 5 months of delivery. Etiology is unknown. Various causes proposed are viral infection, preeclampsia, or autoimmune response to pregnancy. Diagnosis by echocardiogram, which shows left ventricular ejection fraction less than 45% and left ventricular and diastolic dimension greater than 2.7 cm per meter square. Complications that usually occur are thromboembolism, both pulmonary embolism and cerebral thrombosis. Another complication is cardiac failure. Management is treatment of the cardiac failure with furosemide and digitalization. Anticoagulation should be given to prevent thromboembolism. There is a high risk of maternal mortality, about 5 to 50%, 5 to 10%, and only 50% of the women may have a full recovery, and 50% may have a left ventricular ejection fraction may not recover normal, and in such patients the chance of recurrence in the subsequent pregnancy is very high, and pregnancy should be discouraged in this group of patients. To conclude, heart disease in pregnancy is an important cause for maternal mortality. Pre-pregnancy counseling is very important in avoiding such a catastrophe. Care in tertiary care is optimum and should be combined care by the gynecologist, cardiologist, neonatologist and anesthesiologist. The care should be tailored depending on type of heart disease. Good antepartum, intrapartum and postpartum care will avoid maternal morbidity and mortality. Thank you.